Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Saturday, June 27th, 2026, and you're listening to Alex's News. In Riverside, we're looking at a high of 81.8 degrees and a low of 61.9, so it should be a comfortable day to spend some time outdoors. Looking at our top headlines today, we will examine the reasons behind rising friction between the United States and Iran, even as a ceasefire is reportedly in effect. We are also discussing the circumstances surrounding John Bolton entering a guilty plea regarding the retention of classified defense materials. Beyond those major updates, we have a variety of smaller stories to cover as well, to keep you fully informed. We have a packed program ahead, so make sure you stick around for all of that, and much more on today's episode of Alex's News. Stay tuned. Good morning. Tensions between the United States and Iran are flaring again, and a fragile ceasefire is being put to the test. For more, we're joined by reporter Ethan. Ethan, what's happening?
Good morning, Grace. As of today, June 27th, 2026, the U.S. and Iran have traded a series of military strikes. It all centers on the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most vital trade corridors. An interim ceasefire that both sides signed just days ago is now hanging by a thread. And the dispute really comes down to who controls navigation through that waterway.
Let's start at the beginning. What set off this latest round?
It began on Thursday, June 25th, just 2 days ago. A Singapore-flagged cargo ship called the Ever Lovely, owned by Evergreen, was struck by a projectile while transiting the strait. According to the United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations, or UKMTO, the ship was hit roughly 7.5 nautical miles southeast of Oman's port of Dahit. At first, the UKMTO described that projectile only as unidentified.
So who do U.S. officials say was behind it?
President Donald Trump pointed directly at Iran. He asserted that Iran fired at least 4, quote, one-way attack drones, end quote, at ships in the strait. Trump said the U.S. intercepted 3 of them, but the 4th struck the upper deck of the Ever Lovely. He called the incident a, quote, foolish violation, end quote, of the recent truce.
And how is Tehran explaining it?
Tehran actually defended the action, Grace. Iran said the ship was attacked because it used an, quote, unauthorized route, end quote, to cross the waterway. And that gets at the heart of this whole conflict. The U.S. supports a shipping route that hugs the coast of Oman, while Iran insists vessels must coordinate with Iranian authorities and use Tehran-approved routes. So both sides are essentially fighting over what counts as legal passage.
That's a big gap. How did the U.S. respond militarily?
On Friday, June 26th, U.S. Central Command, known as CENTCOM, launched what it called a, quote, powerful response, end quote. According to reporting from NPR, Al Jazeera, and the BBC, U.S. aircraft targeted coastal radar sites, along with missile and drone storage locations inside Iran. That included sites near the southern port of Sirik and on Khorsham Island. A U.S. official told the Associated Press, via NPR, that the strikes wrapped up about an hour after CENTCOM announced the action on social media.
And Iran didn't stay quiet, I imagine.
No, they hit back quickly. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, and Iran's foreign ministry both said they carried out strikes against U.S. military installations and targets linked to American forces in the region. The IRGC also issued a warning, saying future responses would be, quote, more extensive, end quote, if aggression continued. So instead of de-escalating, each side raised the stakes.
You mentioned this spread beyond just the two countries. How so?
That's right. The conflict widened on Saturday, June 27th, which is today. Bahrain's foreign ministry condemned what it called a, quote, flagrant violation, end quote, of its sovereignty after several Iranian drones attacked the country at dawn. And there was another maritime incident, too. The UKMTO reported that a separate tanker was struck by an unidentified projectile today, damaging its bridge, though there were no injuries or environmental damage reported.
Now all of this comes after a peace deal, correct? Tell us about that.
It does, and that's what makes this so striking. These military actions happened just 10 days after the U.S. and Iran signed a 14-point Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, on June 17th. That interim deal was meant to end a war launched by the U.S. and Israel back on February 28th. It was also supposed to be a stepping stone toward permanent negotiations over Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium and the management of the Strait of Hormuz.
What exactly did that memorandum call for?
The MOU established a ceasefire, calling for an end to military operations on all fronts, including in Lebanon. It also asked Iran to use its, quote, best efforts, end quote, to allow commercial vessels safe, toll-free passage through the strait for a 60-day period. So the idea was to calm the waters, both literally and diplomatically. But as we're seeing, the language left a lot of room for disagreement.
So how is each side interpreting whether the deal was broken?
This is where it gets complicated. The U.S. views the ever-lovely attack as a clear violation, but Ibrahim Azizi, who heads the Iranian Parliament's National Security Commission, argued on social media that the strike wasn't a violation at all. He called it, quote, ceasefire management, end quote, and accused the U.S. of the real violation by striking Iranian soil during negotiations. On top of that, Al Jazeera reported the ceasefire has been further undermined by Israel's continued bombardment of Lebanon.
Let's talk about the wider impact. What does this mean for the global economy?
The stakes are huge, Grace, because the Strait of Hormuz is so central to global trade. Since the war began in February, Iran's closure of the strait caused global oil and fertilizer prices to spike. So when shipping through that corridor slows down, the effects ripple worldwide, from fuel costs to food production. That's why every incident there draws such close attention from markets.
And I understand there's a humanitarian dimension as well.
There is, and it's an important one. The recent drone attack halted a critical humanitarian operation. The International Maritime Organization, the IMO, had begun moving stranded sailors out of the strait using that alternative Omani route. According to IMO Secretary General Arsenio Dominguez, roughly 115 ships had successfully moved out, but about 500 still remain. The IMO has now paused all evacuations until it gets guarantees that ships won't be attacked.
So traffic through the strait is dropping noticeably.
It is. The maritime data company Windward noted that while the strait technically remains operationally open, the, quote, pace of normalization has slowed, end quote. To put real numbers on it, on Wednesday, 78 vessels transited the strait, but after the incident, that number dropped to just 43. So you can see how quickly the shipping community pulled back once the danger spiked.
Where do things stand politically right now?
The U.S. is holding a firm line. Vice President J.D. Vance said on social media that while Iran can, quote, pick up the phone, end quote, to resolve disagreements over the MOU, quote, violence will be met with violence, end quote. So Washington is signaling it won't back down, but it's also leaving a door open for talks. The question is whether either side trusts the other enough to walk through it.
Is there any insight into why this deal is proving so unstable?
There is some useful perspective on that. Alan Ayre, a former senior U.S. diplomat, told Al Jazeera that the MOU was intentionally ambiguous. He said that vagueness has allowed conflicting visions of, quote, freedom of navigation, end quote, to clash. And that, in turn, has created an environment of high ambient risk for commercial shipping. In other words, the deal that was meant to bring peace may have built in the very confusion now fueling the conflict.
So what should we be watching for in the coming days?
The key things are whether the ceasefire holds, and whether those evacuations can resume. The IMO won't move forward without safety guarantees, so those 500 remaining ships are essentially stuck. We'll also be watching whether Iran follows through on its warning of a more extensive response, and how the U.S. reacts to today's incidents in Bahrain and at sea. Right now, every move risks pulling that fragile truce apart entirely.
Sobering stuff. Ethan, thank you for breaking it all down for us.
My pleasure, Grace. I'll keep tracking it and bring you updates as they come.
Welcome back. This morning we're following a major legal development out of Maryland involving a former top national security official. John Bolton has pleaded guilty. In a classified documents case, our reporter Chloe has been tracking it. Chloe, good morning. What exactly happened in court?
Good morning, Grace. So just yesterday, on Friday, June 26th, former National Security Advisor John Bolton, who's 77, pleaded guilty in federal court in Greenbelt, Maryland. He admitted to one felony count of illegally retaining national defense information. U.S. District Judge Theodore D. Chuang presided over the plea. And this resolves a fight that started back in October of last year, when Bolton was indicted on 18 separate counts.
18 counts down to 1. So what were all those charges actually about?
They centered on what prosecutors described as diary-like notes that Bolton kept while he served as National Security Advisor from April 2018 to September 2019. According to the BBC and CBS News, those documents included typed transcriptions of his handwritten notes, and the sensitive part is the classification. Some of this material was classified all the way up to top secret, including what's called sensitive compartmented information, or SCI. That's about as protected as government information gets.
And I understand he didn't just keep these notes. He shared them?
That's right, and this is really the heart of the case. Court filings detailed by PBS NewsHour through the Associated Press say Bolton shared more than 1,000 pages of these entries with 2 unauthorized family members. Those were his wife and his daughter. This happened over a 7-year span. He used personal email accounts, including Google and AOL, and a commercial non-governmental messaging app, so none of this was on secure government systems.
1,000 pages is a lot. Did prosecutors suggest he knew this was risky?
They did, and they pointed to the messages themselves. Prosecutors noted Bolton seemed mindful of the secrecy. In one message to his relatives, he wrote, quote, "None of which we talk about," end quote, with 2 exclamation points. And a relative responded, quote, "Shh," end quote. Now, to be fair, there's no evidence the relatives ever passed the information along to anyone else. But the exchange clearly suggested everyone understood this was supposed to stay quiet.
You mentioned the family didn't spread it further. But was the information ever actually exposed?
Yes, and this is the part that really raises the stakes. The BBC reports that a hacker linked to the Islamic Republic of Iran gained unauthorized access to Bolton's personal email account, and that hacker used the materials to make a threat. They said this could be, quote, "the biggest scandal since Hillary's emails were leaked," end quote, referring there to Hillary Clinton. So a foreign adversary actually got into the account where this classified material was sitting.
That's striking. Let's talk about the deal he struck. What penalties is Bolton facing?
So the charge he pleaded to, retaining national defense information, carries a maximum of 10 years. But Bolton reached a plea deal with the Justice Department that recommends capping his prison sentence at 60 months, which is 5 years, and there's a safety valve for him. If Judge Chuang imposes a sentence longer than 5 years, or a fine bigger than what they agreed on, Bolton has the right to withdraw his plea entirely.
So prison is one piece. What else did he agree to give up?
Quite a bit, actually. There's a financial penalty of $2,250,000. Half of that is due within 5 days of the plea, and the rest within 90 days. He also agreed to the complete forfeiture of his federal retirement pay and benefits, and that's not just for him. It covers his family as well. So this hits the household finances pretty significantly.
Beyond the money, is there anything he has to do personally?
There is. Bolton agreed to 100 hours of community service, and it's specific. That service has to be dedicated to helping government efforts to prevent the unlawful disclosure of classified information. He also has to sit for a mandatory debriefing with federal intelligence and national security officials about the material he retained. That debriefing matters because the government needs to understand exactly what was exposed and to whom.
And when does he actually learn his sentence?
Bolton is scheduled to be sentenced on October 28th, so that's about 4 months from today. Between now and then, the financial pieces start coming due, but the prison question stays open until Judge Chuang makes his decision in late October.
Let's hear from both sides. What are prosecutors saying about why this mattered?
U.S. Attorney Kelly O. Hayes really emphasized the seriousness here. She pointed out that Bolton was well versed in the protocols for handling sensitive data. This wasn't someone who didn't know the rules. Hayes said Bolton put national security at, quote, grave risk, end quote, and that he was fully aware of the potential damage his actions could cause. So the prosecution's framing is that an experienced official knew better and did it anyway.
And how is Bolton's team responding to that?
His defense attorney, Abbe Lowell, painted a very different picture. Lowell characterized the plea as an act of leadership. He argued that by taking responsibility for what he called a, quote, mistake, end quote, Bolton actually saved the government the resources of a trial. And Lowell made an interesting point there, saying a trial might have inadvertently exposed even more sensitive information. So the defense is framing this as Bolton doing the responsible thing.
I imagine the defense also brought up President Trump, given their history.
They absolutely did. Lowell took direct aim at President Donald Trump. He argued that Trump, quote, thumbed his nose, end quote, at classified information laws by taking documents to his Florida residence and then interfering with the investigation that followed. So Lowell is essentially drawing a contrast, suggesting his client is being treated more harshly than the president was for similar conduct.
Is there a broader pattern that legal observers are pointing to here?
There is some context worth knowing. The BBC notes that Bolton's case follows a string of criminal charges against critics of the current administration. That includes Letitia James and James Comey, so some people see a political thread running through these prosecutions. But legal experts told the BBC that Bolton's case is actually distinct, and the reason is the strength of the evidence. The hacked emails, the messages, the 1,000-plus pages, that's a very different evidentiary picture.
Remind us how Bolton and Trump fell out in the first place.
Their relationship soured after Bolton was fired in 2019. Then in 2020, he published a memoir called The Room Where It Happened. In it, he portrayed Trump as ill-informed on geopolitics. The White House actually sued, unsuccessfully, to block that book's release, arguing it contained unvetted classified information. But here's an important distinction. These criminal charges focus specifically on the diary entries he shared with family, not on the contents of the published book.
And when did investigators first move on him?
After the investigation began, FBI agents searched Bolton's home and his Washington, D.C. office back in August of 2025. So that's roughly 10 months ago. That search was really the public's first big signal that this case was moving forward. And it led, eventually, to the October indictment and now to yesterday's guilty plea.
And has the president weighed in since the plea came down?
He has. President Trump responded to the guilty plea on Truth Social. He called Bolton a, quote, sleazebag, end quote, and he added, quote, hopefully he will be dealt with harshly, end quote. So the president is clearly watching this closely, and his comments come ahead of that October 28th sentencing, where Judge Chuang will decide just how harsh the outcome actually is.
So a lot still hinges on that late October date.
Exactly right. The guilty plea settles the question of responsibility, but the prison term is still genuinely up in the air. If Chuang stays within that 5-year cap, the deal holds. If he goes beyond it, Bolton can walk it back. So everyone, from prosecutors to the defense to the White House, will be focused on that courtroom in Greenbelt come October 28th.
Really important reporting on a fast-moving story. Chloe, thank you for breaking it all down for us this morning.
Happy to, Grace. We'll keep following it as we head toward that sentencing date.
Here are some other headlines. Turning to the skies, Ukraine has really upped the ante with a drone strike that can only be described as a high-flying offensive. On June 26th, drones swarmed 12 Russian regions, Crimea, and both the Black and Azov Seas. Russia claims their defenses were on point, swatting away 660 drones, marking a new peak in this aerial chess match. Ukraine is claiming a sinking feeling for the Russian Navy, alleging hits on the Volga, the Vyatka, and the Petropavlovsk and Kerch, while Moscow says 47 drones were grounded before hitting the capital with no damage. Unverified reports suggest a chemical and hydroelectric plant in Novomoskovsk may have gone up in smoke. This blitz is part of a 40-day influence operation ordered by President Zelensky to force Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table, buoyed by promises of support from President Trump. In a rare moment of harmony, both sides exchanged 160 prisoners of war on Friday. Closer to home, the Religious Liberty Commission is looking to bridge the gap between church and state. Their 224-page draft report suggests we stop separating the two and start building bridges instead. The proposal is quite a leap of faith, suggesting the elimination of the Johnson Amendment to let religious groups get political, expanding public funding for faith-based agencies, and creating new honors like the First Freedom Hero Awards. They also want to compensate military members who were booted for refusing vaccine mandates and install Know Your Rights posters. The public has 15 days to weigh in on this spiritual shift. In legal news, the Supreme Court has given President Trump a green light to deport hundreds of thousands of migrants under temporary protected status and block most asylum seekers. While some say the president should have the final say on who enters the country, experts warn we are hitting a demographic cliff. With birth rates plummeting and migrant numbers predicted to drop from 2,700,000 in 2024 to as low as 300,000 this year, economists fear a future of closed schools and a social security system that is running out of steam. Speaking of steam, the economy is feeling the heat. The price index rose 4.1%, the fastest climb since April 2023. Core inflation is up 3.4%, though disposable income saw a tiny 0.3% bump. Experts believe inflation may have peaked in May as oil prices drop following the Iran war, but the Federal Reserve may still feel the pressure to raise interest rates. Finally, a heartbreaking situation in Venezuela where the earth literally shook. Twin quakes of magnitudes 7.2 and 7.5 have left La Guaira in ruins. The toll is staggering, with at least 920 dead and over 51,000 missing. As the government restricts access to the area, desperate residents are taking matters into their own hands, using power tools to dig for loved ones in a race against time. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Opus 4.8, Gemini Pro 3.1, Gemini Flash 3, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.